Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, stressed out Christians who don't want to just get through the day and instead want to thrive, to have adventure and fun and
peace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All that great stuff.
Stuff we're actually called to do as Christians.
Exactly. Joy. I'm Liz Frericks, and this is my husband, Evan.
Hi there.
We're so glad you guys are here with us. It's Friday.
Yep. Happy Friday.
Woo.
Yep. Pretty excited over here.
This week we are talking about scarcity. Just such a great topic. I really enjoyed talking about this week.
Yeah, I could tell.
And it's
good.
one of those things that's really life-changing once you understand what scarcity is, how it affects you every day, or at least for me, it affects me every day.
Yeah.
And then how to combat it is just so amazing.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, once you start thinking about it, it's like, whoa, I really do hang on to this. But before that, you're like, scarcity? I mean, I don't know. But then, we kind of mapped it out this week. It's a big problem for our faith.
Very pervasive,
Yes.
So today we are going to talk about being complete, since it's Friday. Being complete is, utilizing your entire self, not being fragmented in any way, not being compartmentalized into like home person and work person and church person, and then being fully engaged with what is actually happening, not being stuck in the past or the present or living in denial, but being here and now in the real world.
Yeah, we only exist in this moment. We can't go to the past or the future. We send our mind there all the time, though.
Right.
And we get into trouble. And especially when we're talking about scarcity, a big part of that connection is then going to be into God's provision for us, whatever.
Right.
Physical provision. Just the provision of 24 hours a day today.
Yeah.
The provision of our relationships and our calling and our skills. Like all these things come from God. Mm-hmm. And once we get into scarcity, we start to think that somehow
he made a mistake. There's not enough.
Right. There's not enough. And we're in charge of getting more. And, but there's no more even to get. And then we just start to panic.
And I think one way that this shows up in our relationships is a perception that nobody listens or hears us. Kind of that emo, no one understands me.
Right.
But, that's a real thing. Like, we get stuck in that sometimes, feeling like we're alone, and it is our job to fix everything.
Yeah, I think we start to feel like that if we are not getting feedback.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're just not going to get the feedback. And then we start to wonder, well, is this right? Nobody is congratulating me. That's a tricky spot to be in. It shows that we're depending on that attaboy from someone, and maybe we're not depending so much on God's calling. The confidence of that, but
recognizing that this is a need, because for a long time, the way I handled my need to be known and to be accepted and all those things was to just push it away and be like, oh, I'm being such a baby. Why do I don't really need this. I'm just
trying to be more independent and get by without the support of people.
Well, yeah, not so much being like, oh, I'm a lone ranger, I don't need anyone, but just still like, oh, I don't need praise.
Sure.
And I don't need someone to know me or to understand me as long as I'm doing my job. As long as I'm listening to other people, I'm, engaged with what is happening in my life. I don't need somebody to say good job.
Yeah.
And if I do need that, then I'm just being needy and whiny and a baby.
Yeah, that could be kind of a weird scarcity thing too, where you're cutting yourself off from some potential personal resources, some interaction and stuff.
I think for me it was more like I'm not getting it, and so when I feel like I need it, then I jump into like, no, I don't need it. I'm being a baby here.
Yeah.
But I think we forget that acceptance is the difference between life and death for babies. Like, you see this so clearly in babies. If they don't have love and acceptance, they do.
Yeah, they suffer.
They can die.
Yeah.
they do failure to thrive, like they get sicker and sicker. So we see this in babies, and I think sometimes we forget as adults that we have those same needs. Just because they're not as visible doesn't mean they're not there.
Mm-hmm. And I think when we're not in a situation where we are having that, another big symptom of, the scarcity mindset with Complete is we're going to not take as many risks, and we're not going to try some stuff that maybe we ought to try to fulfill our calling. But if we're not feeling that love, we could start to withdraw,
right,
and not do things we ought to do. Yeah, that's a tricky one though. Like needing the right amount of that kind of feedback, but not depending on it, but then not, trying to pretend that you don't need any of it.
Right.
I mean, God's put us in, groups, and that's an important part of being in a group is supporting each other in that way.
Right. But I think as always, it has to start with the Lord meeting that need. One of the verses that I love is Psalm 90:14, which says, "Satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all our days." And that's one of those verses that I started praying for myself regularly because I know myself. And if I don't have the Lord satisfying me with his love and, meeting that need to feel known and accepted, then I start, manipulating or trying to meet those needs in some other unhealthy way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when we're asking that question, what if someone is not paying attention or nobody notices what I'm doing? Like, that's probably the wrong question. That's too much focus on that. And like you said, we start with our relationship to God. Like, the real first question is, am I being obedient to answer God's call?
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the door through which there will be other it'll lead to some of these other feedback things that we desire and that we actually need, because God's call is always enacted in a group. It's never just one guy all by himself answering God's call. He's calling individuals in groups to do things in the world.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about answering God's call is that there are resources there. God doesn't call you to something and say, yeah, and now figure it out. It comes with per diem. It comes with a government credit card or whatever, a company card where God's like, yeah, I want you to do this, and I'm paying for it. I just need you to obey. So, there's all kinds of reinforcement there coming from him, and then that can give us some of the confidence to be more, interact better with others, because that's our real foundation.
Yeah, and if we're seeking God's approval first, it sets us free from, other people's approval. Because it's way too easy to handle our need for acceptance and belonging and love and all that stuff by getting swept away trying to get it from people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to remember though, but yeah, their approval of us, or their approval or rejection, doesn't fill up or siphon off any gas from our gas tank.
Right.
God fills up our gas tank.
Yeah, and I think too, going back to the complete thing, we need to deal with what's actually happening. I thought it was so interesting in Daring Greatly, where Brene Brown talks about what they found was that, the only difference between people who feel loved and people who don't feel loved is whether they believe that they're lovable. It has nothing to do with circumstances. Like, they could have the same people saying the same things in their lives, and the people who believe that they are lovable accept it as love.
Yeah.
And the people who believe they're unlovable don't accept it.
And
they accept all the negative things, whereas the people who, believe that they're lovable accept the positive things.
That's a good point. And so if we're not realizing that we're so lovable because God is pouring out his lavish love on us, we're not going to accept love from anybody else either.
Right, like we were talking about yesterday with recognizing that you are a masterpiece telling God's story. And that's incredible. If you really just sit and think about that and think about how precious you are, I don't know. Sometimes it kind of blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, his care for us, his approval, and his provision is enough to sustain us without any other human encouragement. But part of his sustaining love is his desire for us to be in a group of mutual love and respect.
Right. Yes.
And it's an amazing thing when that is all kind of meshing together.
All right. Well, hopefully that gives us all something to think about. We want to live in reality, recognize that our need to be loved and accepted is a need, not just a want. And then, deal with what actually is. Handle it from the perspective that you are lovable and be able to receive love rather than just being like, oh, yeah, nobody ever listens to me. Nobody ever cares.
Yeah.
I can tell you that the more you say that to yourself, the more true it becomes because you stop hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. And nobody, those people aren't going to be able to convince you you're lovable. God has to change your heart.
Right. Yeah. As always, this stuff is heart change rather than circumstance change. So that's definitely part of it. If you are in a relationship, though, where someone is abusive, who is, holding up your worth and saying that you're not worthwhile or things like that, don't stay in it. Because, part of being in good community and having healthy boundaries is to continue saying, yep, I'm lovable. So if you say that I'm not lovable, I don't need that in my life. All right. We love you guys and we are praying for you. Thanks to everybody that's been sharing the show and listening to the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this podcast helpful, please do continue to share it. If you have not signed up for our email list, go ahead and do that because we're sending out previews for the following week and links to the episode for the previous week. So if you missed anything, you can catch up that way.
Yeah.
We will talk to you guys next week.
Yeah.
Have an awesome weekend.
See you later.